is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Let me hear you say, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Oh, yeah. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. All right. This is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. Everybody say, this is the day that the Lord has made. I will rejoice. It's a day.
Good morning. Welcome to West Valley Center for Spiritual Living. My name is Reverend Clyde Goings, and we are very excited that you're here. We're excited you're online, and we're glad that the service is starting. It's been very eventful before the service got started, so we're just settling into this beautiful space, and so I'm so grateful for that. Just a little information for you. Our speakers are not working right now, so we had to have our backup speaker, and I think it sounds good. And we have the point of light here to have some beautiful music, so they'll be bringing us into that centering, spacious place of that love, joy-filled home that we call West Valley Center for Spiritual Living. So I just want to share with you real quick, before I give you a couple of announcements. So Reverend Karen and I have, we call it Taco Night, every once in a while on Friday nights when we get together, and we spend a lot of time over tacos talking about a lot of business. And anyways, I sent her a text yesterday morning because Friday when we got together Friday and had dinner together, we talked very little bit about the center and everything that we're working on, and really just kind of shared with each other and get caught up with each other. And so it was just really sweet. It felt good to just be, somewhat relaxed, and I kind of feel like that's kind of what's going on, is that things are starting to relax a little bit more into normalcy, and it just feels good. So I'm hoping that you as well is trying to make that shift and feeling a little more normal and really starting to enjoy life again. So so thank you for being here. So a couple of quick announcements. Again, we're doing the bookstore drive, collecting items for the bookstore. I also want to remind everybody, I haven't brought this up, but we've still been doing it. We have been meeting every Wednesday night for 3 years. We're on page 321, I think, or something like that. So we're going through the Science of Mind textbook. We got about a couple of years left. So if you want to join, there's still plenty of time to join. But we meet every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, and I will tell you, it's been an incredible process, but going through, and especially, we always had that Wednesday night to get together and ground each other when we went through this whole, the time due to COVID stuff. So it's just wonderful. So again, every Sunday now that we've got the doors open, we've got people online, but now we're starting to come back together and sharing our love here in the community. And so I'm so grateful for all of you that are here, and that we come together to remember that truth, that we're whole, perfect, and complete just the way we are. Even with funny sound, it's still all perfect and complete. So thank you. So before we get the service started, we'd like to say the vision statement. So if you could repeat the vision statement with me. We are a loving, joy-filled community honoring the many paths to God as we learn and live the Science of Mind principles. And so it is. Thank you.
I will make a quiet place within my heart, and I will wait upon the Lord, wait upon the Lord. I will make a quiet place within my mind, and I will wait upon the Lord, wait upon the Lord. Be still, my soul, be still. Be still, my soul, be still. Be still and know. I will make a quiet place within my life, and I will wait upon the Lord. Wait upon the Lord. I will make a quiet place within my heart, and I will wait upon the Lord. Wait upon the Lord. I will make a quiet place within my mind, and I will wait upon the Lord. Wait upon the Lord.
Good morning. God is right here, right now. God is the essence of all there is. God is love, beauty, light, knowledge, wisdom, health, prosperity, abundance. All that God is. Things seen and things unseen. And as I know this is true for me, I know that it's true for everyone in this room, everyone outside of this room, everyone that is watching. It is true for all of humanity. And I am just so grateful for today, for this wonderful unfolding service that will lift us up. I say a word of blessing for Reverend Karen. The one mind speaks through her, teaches us, so that we can take the lessons that we need to hear, incorporate them in our lives. I say a word of blessing for Point of Light. It's so awesome to see you guys. I know your music is just going to make us all feel really, really good. And knowing that this is a perfect service, I just release this into the law, knowing that it is done. And so it is. Okay, I have a new book. I'm reading Interpretation of Scripture by Neville Goddard. I was kind of like, okay. This is on page 90. Let the weak say, I am strong. Man in his blindness will not heed the prophet's advice. He continues to claim himself to be weak, poor, wretched, and all the other undesirable expressions from which he is trying to free himself by ignorantly claiming that he will be free from these characteristics in the expectancy of the future. Such thoughts thwart the one law that can ever free him. There is only one door through which you seek. That which you seek can enter your world. I am the door. When you say, I am, you are declaring yourself to be. First person, present tense. There is no future. To know that I am is to be conscious of the being. Conscious is the only door. Unless you are conscious of being that which you seek in vain. If you judge after appearances, you will continue to be enslaved by the evidence of your senses. Let us ponder that for a couple minutes. And so it is. you're always home. I'm not sure you understand. I am your greatest fan. Do you know how adore you are? How your precious heart is honored here. Do you know that you are loved and glorious? Just the way you are. Do you know how adored you are? Secrets of the for God along the way. You are cherished, you are safe. I'm right here in everything you do. Take a breath, I'm breathing you. Do you know how adored you are? How your precious heart is honored here. Do you know that you are loved and glorious? Just the way you are. Do you know how adored you are? And know how you will love yourself, sweet child of mine. Only you can see yourself through my eyes. You would know how adored you are, how your precious heart is honored here. You would know that you are loved and you're enough. Just the way you are. It's yours to believe, yours to believe, yours to receive. It's yours. Do you know how adored you are?
That was so beautiful, Point of Light. Oh my goodness, that was so beautiful. And I believe I've asked before, is that Daniel name on it? So good. So here's my question to you. How do you take a piece of music and figure out how to do all that harmony around it? Heather, they're all pointing at Heather. Magnificent. So good to know. It was really so beautiful. And I don't think I've ever stopped to think about that. Like, where did harmony come from? I mean, I know where harmony came from. It's the whole point, right? There is one God. There today is one mic. There is, and there's one idea. So but it's amazing to me that it's what I'm speaking about today, because it's the idea of ideas. You know, that somebody has an idea, that Heather's looking through music and somehow she hears, I'm going to guess you hear in your mind the harmony and you know what's possible. And then you step into motion to figure it out and arrange it so that these gorgeous voices can join you. And we then get the privilege of appreciating you. So good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. I'm Reverend Karen Rice, and I am the spiritual leader of this community. And I am speaking today on being open to new ideas. And I took most of my inspiration this week from a book that is not by Ernest Holmes, the founder of this teaching, The Science of Mind. And so he didn't write the book, but the book is kind of about him. It has a lot of great stories if you're ever interested in knowing more about the man. But what's really exciting is that there are also lectures that have been transcribed that he actually gave back in the late 1950s. And so today I'm speaking on a lecture that I especially have appreciated through the years. And it's the same title as the book. The title of the book and the chapter I'm referencing is Ideas of Power. And I wanted us to just have a whole morning where we focus on how important it is to start at the beginning and to know that everything was an idea before it comes into form. And I want us to be able to use this in a really personal way. By the way, the reason I call it my favorite lecture in that particular book is because it's a lecture that Dr. Holmes gave on April 27th of 1958 when I was celebrating my 7th birthday. So because that's in there, it was interesting to me, but then it turns out the information is so valuable. And he also gave that lecture at the Wiltern Theater. So, and I'm originally from Los Angeles, and I know we have a lot of LA transplants here in the community and listening online. And so many of us have been to the Wiltern for all kinds of different enjoyable events. So I wanted to begin by telling you a little a bit of a story. I'm going to paraphrase some personal story that Dr. Holmes spoke about in this particular book, and or the lecture, I guess we should say it was the lecture where he spoke about it. And he was talking about looking to have a personal experience of oneness with God. And we talk about oneness and wholeness and everything is perfect, whole, and complete. And those are great concepts that we can intellectually understand. But Dr. Holmes was a bit of a mystic, and he wanted an experience of it. He was really open to that divine idea that it was possible to have that sort of communion and experience of oneness with God. So this was a night where it was before he was going to lecture in the morning, and it happened to be an evening where that twice a year they change the time in every state but ours, I guess, which I love that we don't do that. But he knew he was going to lose an hour's sleep, and so you know how you get that on your mind, like, oh, but I have to get enough rest, and then of course you stay awake thinking about how I have to go to sleep now. And it becomes increasingly difficult to do that. So he would use his awake time. He found that in the stillness of the night, when others were sleeping, if he was still awake, that would be a perfect time to practice being open to this idea of communing with the presence of God. And so he was saying, I better go to sleep now, but I can't. And here's the line that I love that really inspired me this week. He said, I can't go to sleep because I want to open myself to the lover of my soul. Oh, isn't that gorgeous? I don't want to sleep because I want to use this time now to be open to the lover of my soul. He said, I want to invite whatever that thing is that made me, I want to invite that into my life so that it flows through me. And I heard that, and I've read it more than a couple times, but I thought, as we're looking at this concept of being open to new ideas, that's an idea. What a great use of your time if you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't get yourself back to sleep, right? So I have this vision that it's like Spirit is always courting us, You know, there's always that essence of divine intelligence everywhere present. There's that what we call that force of that God is that love is the strongest and greatest force of God. Love is that force. We talked about that last week. That was it was the force be with you last week was the title of the talk. And so I love that way that he references not only the intimacy, the desire for intimacy, calling God the lover of my soul, but then he goes on to say this: I want to experience a tiny speck of that divine possibility that is already incarnated in me. I want to experience that. Now, that really calls to me. How often do we dare to just sort of open ourselves in that kind of way, to have an experience in this well-studied, well-practiced, this man that understood spiritual principle as good as anybody, and he said, I want a tiny speck of that divine possibility, which implies to me how well he understood the vastness of it as well. And that's what I want us to look at today. I want us to really look at, can be a tiny speck. It can be a little glimpse of what's possible. It can be a way we just slightly sense the presence of something that's really true. You know how you have those moments in your life where you just know that you know that you know. You know, that's what I'm talking about, that divine recognition, or they would say, the metaphysicians would call it a full realization. And it is a realization of that presence, that, sitting in the presence of that intelligence, the glimmers of God that are ideas. And so as I continue to talk to you and work in my own personal way, as a spiritual practice, is I work always to broaden my understanding, to have a greater understanding of what God is. I've just noticed through the years, God is less and less something outside of me that I pray to. Right? I begin to understand in a much deeper way that it's more like the idea of trying to understand what it means to say that God is everywhere present, and that when you're a little kid, you feel like God's spying on you, and your mom uses it to make you do good things. None of you would do that to your child, right? Blame it all on, yes, that's a good direction to go. I think that for most of the world, it's about the same thing. That's the way we've handled that situation. But I was thinking about it like this, and I've spoken this before. I had this idea years ago. I said it here, but here's a visualization I did in my own mind when I'm attempting to understand, because it's kind of hard to understand the infinite because we're so absolutely finite in our physicalness. But I think of it like motes of dust that are everywhere present. So if you've ever been in a room where suddenly the light shifts and the sun shines through a window, and wherever that light, it's like you can see that light, those bars of light that are lit, you can see motes of dust moving around everywhere, and it's kind of stunning. It always makes me want to cough. It's like, oh, really? We live in that? But that's what I think. It's a good symbol of how this intelligence of all the universe that is everywhere present is always hovering right in front of us. It's always activating and alive within us. It's why we can nurture physical bodies, because there's an intelligence in us that does all that for us. And so think of it like those motes of dust are what if they were motes of love? Of God's perfect love hovering all around you. And you have a glimpse of it in just a moment. You have a moment of recognizing, oh, what a beautiful symbol this is. That the divine truth is everywhere present, all around me, alive and moving and active at all times. And so I just love that concept. And today I want to extend it just a tiny bit by saying, what if we imagined little motes of divine ideas are now surrounding us and moving and just waiting for us to recognize them and then embody them in a, not in a physical way, but in that inner way, in that spiritual idea of connection and of oneness. See, I am never going to forget that. That for me makes a beautiful image, and images help me take an idea and embrace it in a very deep inner way. So there are laws in place, there are physical laws in place in life, and just as there are spiritual laws in place. And they are always working, or the universe wouldn't be able to be so successful in rotating planets and planning eclipses and all the things that happen like in this so scientific way. And I sometimes think it helps us. I'm teaching the foundation class right now, and in last week's material, one of the illustrations they gave in trying to understand spiritual laws is that it's like the law of mathematics, right? The law of mathematics is invisible. You can't see it. I mean, somebody can write it out and you can read it, but the law itself is invisible, and it always works with perfect accuracy. It never fails us. And so when I study addition and subtraction and multiplication and division, and then you get into fractions and decimals, when I study and practice, remember when you took math in school? Math was the kind of homework where you have to do the worksheet and you answer 500 problems, so you just do it by repetition till you get it, or you memorize your times tables and don't you wish you memorized them better? I don't know where they're all going. I used to know them. I can't pull them up as easily as I used to. But they work with great precision all the time. Now, it won't balance my checkbook for me. Right? I still have to do the work and sit down and balance the checkbook. And when I apply the principles in the way that they are designed to be used, the principles of mathematics, everything comes out perfect. But because it's a human doing it, there's room for human error. So sometimes when you balance the checkbook, it doesn't quite balance. But you know that the law of mathematics always works with exact precision, and then if you sit with it long enough, you can make your checkbook balance. Well, some people, if you can get help if you can't figure it out. But the idea is that we practice in the same way you practice math and learn your times tables. We practice spiritual principles so we can use them, and then we not only can manage our money because we have some knowledge of whether we realize that's math or not, doesn't matter, but we also have, we're gifted with this ability then to do, if I want to build a bookcase, I will be using the laws of mathematics. I will be applying geometry and measurement into all of that. So these are principles that are consistent and ongoing in life, and they are ever available, and we can study and learn, and I can figure out how to build a bookcase, or I can order one that's already built and have it delivered, right? Or I can go to IKEA if you're me, and I love bookcases. If you've been to my house, you know I love bookcases. For me, I could go to IKEA and have somebody load up the back of the pickup truck and have my daughters build the bookcases because they love to do that, and I'm not so fond of it. But the skill is there, and when the law is there, and when you are skilled, when you have studied it and you understand it, you can use it and you can make something out of it. The more accurately we apply the laws of mathematics, the more success we have in the way we try and apply it. And so spiritual laws are just that. It's all the same thing. It's a principle. It's a law that exists, and it always works perfectly. And if we don't learn how to use the spiritual laws, we have encounters in our life that maybe aren't as necessary as we have thought them to be. Because it's easy to think that you're just a victim to what happens to you. But the more knowledge we gain, then when we rise out of that kind of thinking, that kind of ignorance, they call it sometimes, and then we can make other decisions. So I can want to build a bookcase, or you can want to make a piece of music that Point of Light can sing. But before we do that, the idea has to come first. And where do ideas come from? All ideas come from the same creative source, that creative energy that created us and created all of life. So we look at that idea, and I think this is a really good reason when you put this all together like a formula, you can see that it's a really good idea that we should desire to be spiritually open to the divine ideas. Because see, divine ideas are desiring expression on this planet all the time. And we can understand that if we look at the way if you study biology and you look at the scientific study of how evolution occurs, how life itself knows how to adapt to whatever comes before it, we can really begin to see that that's how life is, that all of God's laws, whether they are physical or spiritual, all of them work with mathematical certainty. And I can learn to use those laws, and so can you. And that's why we meet together every week. That's why we come together every week. That's why we offer classes to study. That's the beautiful part about this teaching, is that it is considered an educational, not a religious approach to life. But we are born on this idea of education, coupled with the idea of being open at the top. Open at the top. Holmes used to say, be open to an influx of new information. That's where all the possibilities are. So let's open ourselves to new ideas. Let's remember that new ideas are floating around us all the time, just like motes of dust, except that you can't see them no matter how the light's reflected. But you can learn to sense them, and you can learn to use them, and they can change your life. So I guess the only question is, what would you like to create? Frank Lloyd Wright, the great architect that we are blessed here in Phoenix to sort of feel like we have part-time ownership of him. Frank Lloyd Wright was genius in being open to new ideas and trying out things that had never been done before and standing in the possibility of that. And Frank Lloyd Wright made such an impression on Phoenix that Bell Road turns in, you go drive it far enough east, it turns into Frank Lloyd Wright Boulevard. Frank Lloyd Wright spent half of his year here. He lived in the east somewhere, I think Wisconsin. He had several residences. But when he was here, we love that he left his footprint here, so to speak. And he actually passed in St. Joe's Hospital. This is where he died. But he was 91 years old, I think, when he made his transition. Frank Lloyd Wright said this: an idea is salvation by imagination. And we should listen to this. This is a man who could really speak to this. An idea is salvation by imagination. You see, Frank Lloyd Wright, even as a young man, knew that he could do anything through the power of what he could imagine. And when we begin to realize that there is no end, there is no limit to what we could imagine if we would be generous with ourselves in those ideas, we could overcome anything. And I think the only problem we have, the only reason we don't get good ideas, well, first of all, we don't always know we can. We don't always have that belief that we can. Your song was, those lyrics, that was so gorgeous. And that reminds me of this. It's like sometimes our confidence isn't high enough that we realize anything is possible. So it's like you go through life and you kind of get like writer's block, like there's a deadline looming ahead in your future, and suddenly it just shuts down your imagination, and you can't think any creative thoughts at all. It's sometimes like that for a minister trying to write a message, And what I know is that the movement of life, just the way that we have to live in the world all the time, sometimes we just gather a little crud. We get some stuff clogged up in our mind. We get something happens and there's some negativity hanging around in there. It's not like a mode out there. It's like hunkering down in your mind and stopping you from thinking the thoughts you'd like to. So I have this vision that it's like our mind gets a little gooed up with the crud of life. And every now and then we have to clean that all out. And for me, Sunday morning is like that. Even preparing for Sunday morning gets me really motivated and moving, because I'm hunkering down into spiritual principle when I'm creating a message. So it's sort of like the hard water spots that you get under the faucets in the bathroom sink. You know, if you have a little counter there. So I got to go in there every now and then with a little vinegar and get that hard water to the stain to lift up. You can even feel it. It's cruddy, right? It's the same way your coffee pot gets. Over time, the coffee pot can get the lime deposits, and so the little tube that's supposed to pump the water through, it starts. You notice that the coffee starts dripping slower and slower, and the water is having a harder and harder time getting through, right? And then you got to descale it. You got to get in there and clean things up. So our minds are like that. We, through the daily use of our daily interactions with other people and with situations and with our concerns for what's going on in the world, we crud up. We accumulate some deposits of stuff that doesn't belong in there, and we can do something about it. Especially we can do something about it when we realize we're not broken, right? That's not broken. That's just the stuff that happens. That's normal. It's normal. And there are things you can do about it, but it's just the process of life attracts some of that stuff. The great thinkers and poets called it the grit of the journey. Right? You just pick up grit along the way. And so it doesn't mean when you're going through a hard time or something has gone wrong and you're facing a challenge, it doesn't mean that you haven't been faithful enough. You know, it doesn't mean you've opened yourself in some way that's so old time religion, you know, like, ooh, the devil, it's like, no, it's not like that. It's just there's grit from the journey, and sometimes bad things happen and you have to work on a bad thing especially, and that's why we have pastoral care and spiritual counselors and therapists to help us move through those harder things. But you got to scrape the crud off once in a while. In fact, here's the way Holmes worded it in that same book, Ideas of Power. It is our philosophy that if we scrape away the debris, which is that which contradicts the divine presence, see that any of the stuff that gets in the way and you're not able to recognize the presence of God right in front of you wherever you are at any given moment, we scrape away the debris, that which contradicts the divine presence, then we shall find a divinity concealed in everything, in every person, everywhere, all the time. So we are always surrounded by divine ideas and divine possibilities. And our job is to just stay open. One of my favorite prayer partners always says, open, 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 like that commercial, remember, like 20 years or more ago, Mervyn's. He's the lady waiting in line because she wants to shop at the big sale at Mervyn's. And she stands outside and goes, open, open, open. And so I get that idea. It's easy for me to have that image in my mind. That's how I want to be before God. You know, I want to open my mind to the divine ideas so that I can have that experience of oneness show up in the way that I live my life. I was trying to think of a good illustration to sort of anchor this whole idea, and I happened to think of how when I was a little girl, one day I came home, must have been home, I was little, and my mom was sewing curtains. She had the sewing machine out and she was making curtains. Now, my mom didn't sew clothes, but she was not afraid to tackle any job. She made drapes. That woman was fearless when it comes to stuff like that. And so as a little girl, I had an interest in learning to sew, and she supported that. So she would take scraps of fabric, and she taught me to sit at did I love her sewing machine. I wonder what happened to her sewing machine. She had the best Singer sewing machine in the cabinet. You know what was cool about the cabinet is you open it up and it was always threaded, ready to go. If you had to do a quick seam and a little something that ripped out, you know, it was always there ready to go. And it had a little knee thing. You just sat down. It was always plugged in. Just fix what you need to fix. I'd love to have that sewing machine. Well, I don't need it anymore. Children are grown and all that. But my mom sat me down and taught me on scraps of fabric just to push the fabric through, you know, you just to run it through, and how to keep my hands out of the way and that the needle was going up, you know, so I learned at a really young age to do that. And when I got good enough at it, where I could do a straight line, she taught me to sew two pieces of fabric together and then opened it up and went, look, you made a seam, you know, it's like you could really do something. Well, when I got a little older, maybe 10, 12, I don't know, a lady moved in next door that was quite the seamstress, and she did all the sewing for her children's clothes were all homemade, and she was a really fine seamstress. I never was. But she learned from my mother that I was interested in learning to sew, and she said, I'm going to help you. I'm going to teach you to sew. And so she sent my mother and me to the store and to pick out a pattern and a piece of fabric, and she groomed my mom on what would be an easy starting pattern, and I made a skirt. I made this cute little A-line skirt. I swear to God, when I was writing this out and thinking about it, I could tell you, I can remember how it smelled. It was corduroy. It was like a light brown corduroy, and I can remember touching it, and I remember that when I took it to the neighbor, she said, oh, corduroy is a bit hard to learn on. But we did it, and I made an A-line skirt for myself that I could wear, and it even had a zipper. She made me put a zipper in. I thought she would do it for me, but no, she taught me how, and guess what happened? A good idea turned into lots more good ideas, right? It starts with one idea. Notice that this started with a desire from a little girl, a desire to know how to sew. Playfully, I play around, the neighbor teaches me the mechanics, and I make my first something. By the time I got to high school, I sewed all my clothes for school, and I was proud of it. It was really fun, and I got really good at being creative. So I could take the patterns and mix and match. I could put sleeves from that one over to here, and I could change the line, you know, where the dress was going to be. And Empire was so popular then. You all know that because you've seen my wedding gown, right? And all of that stuff. And I was so creative. And I mean, the best part of all was I could make bell-bottom pants as good as chairs. You would make those bells as thick as you wanted. Sometimes I would cut them off at the knee and make like a big full skirt and attach it just like, oh, I had the best bell bottoms in town. I would still wear them. You know I would. So I say that because it gave me such joy. It fed my passion, which we can see was not so much about sewing as it is about our ability to express creatively. I found an outlet that really turned me on. And then I developed it, practiced it, and it was a great source of, boy, was I happy to know how to sew when I had 4 kids that, you know, and it gave me, you know, this great confidence in a new way to move through life. Plus, it allowed me to express that creativity. So first comes the idea, always. First comes the idea. Then we look to capture the possibilities. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that we should put trust in ideas, not in the circumstances. Put trust in the idea, not the circumstance. Because sometimes you get a good idea and then you start looking at the circumstances and you go, oh, I can't do that. You know, we have a long list of reasons. Too much money, not enough time. I don't have the skill. I can't do that. So I love this good advice. Put trust in the idea. If the idea comes through, you know, then you've tapped into something that is God-given. It is an urge within you that desires to be expressed into form into your life. So don't get weighed down by the details, but ride that creative wave that the idea comes to us on. Just carry that out. I think we've been riding quite a wave for more than a year. We've been riding a wave that we did not see coming and didn't know how to do, couldn't imagine how we were going to do it. But I do believe, and I've said it before, that something desires to be expressed on this planet that has not yet been expressed. And it can only come as we open ourselves to be the conduit for it to be expressed here. And so in the same way that we have all been praying for peace and for hunger to be solved and for cancer to be cured, and all those ways, our prayers for ourselves and our loved ones, in the way that we've been praying, this then becomes an answer to that prayer. A time where we have been stopped abruptly to re-examine the way we are living our lives, individually as well as collectively. And so what I know is that it is this quirky little God-given gift that when we get backed into a corner, most of us will figure out pretty fast how to get out of that corner. We get us in a predicament, we want to solve that predicament. When you feel overwhelmed and you feel that you can't handle a challenge that's in front of your life, that's when you become paralyzed by the fear. We just get overwhelmed with how big it looks, or how unexpected it was, or how much we didn't want that particular change in our lives. And so the challenge, the gift of the challenge is, first of all, we are equipped for it. It is a God-given gift that we can be adaptable and that we can overcome paralysis by changing the way we manage our thought processes and how we show up and how we interact with each other. But I think that the beauty is that it forces us to get out of the box. It gets us out of the ruts that we have found ourselves in. And I want to say that I think that that's absolutely natural, because everything we know about the divine, everything I believe about God and what I've studied, what I know is that the presence of God always leans into change and adaptation, always. Life is ongoing, right? I love that quote from the chapter on immortality where Dr. Holmes says, nature will never let you stay in any one place for too long. In order to satisfy the advancement of the soul, we must have change and transformation. And so in that particular chapter, he was talking about this idea of death and reminding us of the truth of eternality, that we aren't eternal after we die, that we are currently, right now, always eternal, that life is always ongoing. So we are moving through change. We have witnessed that change can be the very, don't laugh, but change can be the very thing that expands what's possible. And that everything is born when something old is complete. Every new thing happens after something else that's old is complete. Every end is a new beginning, every death is a new birth, and every fire is new life when you think of the way we have this image of the phoenix rising out of the ashes. Life is consistently ongoing. And so we have lived in a what the experts are calling a liminal season. I'm intrigued with that term because there are lots of seasons of change that we go through in our lives. But now that we have lived through this liminal season, what I've come to understand is that to be a liminal season is that it has a more profound level of disruption in our life. And so we got stopped. Right? We were like, everything seemed like it was okay. And then suddenly we had thought about live streaming. We played with live streaming, but suddenly we had no choice. The only way to broadcast a Sunday message was to live stream with a bare minimum of number of people in this room. And we figured that out. And it was remarkable. And we have talked about that many times. Like, how does that happen? That you walk in, you don't know what the heck you're doing, but it's an idea in the mind of God. And then we have the fortitude of the people that were committed to be here. And you mix that together and voila, you get a Sunday service. No matter what happens, the show goes on. And we've done it with grace and style and class and humor. a lot of humor. Yeah, a lot of humor. And I'm thrilled to know that that's true. Victor Hugo, he's the poet and the author that he did Les Miserables. He's the guy that wrote that. Victor Hugo said, and the funny thing is that you're going to know the second half of this quote, but you probably won't recognize the first half. Victor Hugo said, "You can resist an invasion of armies, but you cannot resist an idea whose time has come." That's what's happening on the planet right now. We can fight, we can resist, we can protest, but it's an idea whose time has come, and I believe we have called it forward. And now, how will we posture ourselves to be the vessel in which it can express on this planet through us? And what is it? It's peace. It's love. It's a new way of gathering. You can see the symbol of that in the way that we are partially here and we are partially there. Hi, everybody. And so there's something important when he says this first part that I didn't remember ever hearing. You can resist an invasion of armies. That's what we've been doing. See, we can do that because we know how to go to war. We know how to fight. We know how to put up our walls and not fight, to take all our power and be the one with silent treatment. We know how to do all that, and we're quite skilled at it. Because that's all a part of what we're here to learn while we're moving through our experience of being on the planet. We know how to do that warlike thing. What we're here to learn now is how to do the peace-like thing. And that's very different. And I think that when I look at it that way, it helps me understand, like, suddenly the whole world is having a time out. We're shut down and we're trying to manage things and we're figuring out how to do that. Everybody is uncertain. And then all these little wars started to break out. Politics was a big one. Then we got to look at systemic racism. Then we were forced to see that we were shaming each other about whether you were wearing a mask or whether you weren't wearing a mask. There was shame on both sides. We are not doing that anymore. We are not doing that anymore. We have a color-coded system. If you are green, you are comfortable without masks. And if you are red, you still need your space. And if you are yellow, you haven't figured it out already. I admit, I'm yellow. What that means for me is that some days I can hug you. Some days I don't want, I'm still social distancing, right? But I am willing to honor you wherever you are, because that's what we do. That's what our purpose statement says. We honor all paths. I want to meet you where you are, not where I'm at. And I would desire that it would be reciprocated. But you know what? I don't have any control over that. All I can do is me. All I can do is me, and I can do that with love, and I can do that with respect and kindness. So instead of fighting, instead of doing that which is familiar, going to war, which is very instinctual if you look at the primal connections of fight and flight and all that stuff, instead of doing that, let's go to peace. Let's practice kindness, and let's practice caring and compassion and generosity with each other in the same ways that we did a year ago, April, a year ago, May, when the shelves were bare in the grocery store, and I made sure that the people I loved had plenty of food in their house, right? We all did that. The way that we couldn't maybe go hug each other, but we could check up on our loved ones, or we could leave little surprises on their doorstep. Those are the things that make my heart rejoice. We know how to do that. But we shouldn't have to be backed into a corner to be creative enough to think it's a good idea. The good idea is that the world is changing, and the world is going to change for the better. The more of us that believe that and align ourselves to it and participate in the betterment by taking care of our own lives, being accountable for our own choices, then the faster we are going to see that in the consciousness of humanity. I think we're witnessing it already in so many ways. So I wanted to end this morning by revisiting that story of Holmes in the middle of the night, and he can't sleep. And instead, he's opening himself to have an experience. He says, I want to open myself to this lover of my soul. I want to invite whatever this thing is, that which made me, I want to invite it to flow through me. What a great idea. To touch that divinity in the silence of the evening when others are sleeping and you're there awake. What a great spiritual practice. I have a friend who told me once that her grandmother, as she aged, found it increasingly difficult to sleep at night, and she would find herself awake at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, and grandma would pray for her family. She would use that time chatting with God for the well-being of her family. What a great use of our time, of our being awake. But let me just take you that next step. Holmes was going deeper than chatting with God. Holmes was opening himself to have an experience of oneness, an experience of communion with God. And he wrote this in the closing part of this chapter. He said this, and I do spend much time all alone in the middle of the night, sometimes hours upon hours. And I can feel it. I can know it. And it's as real as this. And he touches the lectern because this is a talk, right? It's as real as this. It's as solid as this. And it belongs to everybody. So remember, it belongs to you, and it belongs to me. It belongs to all of us. And we want to be open to that experience of the influx of the divine idea. God has an idea for your life, for my life, and for the future of this planet, and that which is eternal does not waver. It is precise. It is never changing. It is the truth of all truths. So let us use that time in the middle of the night when things are quiet, and let us court the divine, even as the divine is courting us. And let us pray for our families, our own lives, our loved ones, for each other, and for the world. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you. Good timing. And so, as always, it behooves us to end with prayer. And so close your eyes if that feels comfortable for you. And let us begin in this inward journey of recognizing that indeed, right where we are, God is. Spirit itself at the center of our being. In fact, I can feel the love of God within me now. I recognize it as this movement, this activity of life. And it stirs something in my being that allows me to be open. So open minds, open at the top, our hearts begin to open, and we are indeed ready for that influx of divine wisdom. We are indeed poised for the healings that we desire in our experience of living. And so I know, as I recognize this union, this oneness, as I sense the movement of love in this sanctuary, and I know that it vibrates out into the homes of all the listeners. I realize that it is our privilege to be the conduit of love on this planet. That indeed the only way the world will ever be more peaceful is when we as individuals take a profound stand to live our lives peacefully. And so I know that that infinite intelligence of all the universe, that which permeates everything, that which hovers around us like motes of dust, but it's smaller, it's invisible, and yet it's bigger, because it is all of life. It is the allness. It is the absolute. And yet that image so beautifully cradles my being into feeling the support of a universe that loves me, of a God that created me in its image and likeness, that it created all of life, all people, all things, every bird that soars through the sky, every lizard that climbs the backyard wall, every cloud that moves through that gorgeous monsoon sky. All of it is life itself in action. And our ability to appreciate the beauty of it, the perfection of it, calls forward more beauty and more perfection. And this awareness is that quickening which becomes the healing that we are all desiring, not just for the planet, but in our own personal lives. So I know, even as these words are spoken, there is a healing going on. There is a healing, a vibration of the revealing of a greater truth, that which reveals the wholeness and the perfection that is already embedded in every cell of our bodies, and therefore any loved ones who are facing difficult situations, we can know for our loved ones that right where they are, there is God. And whatever it is that concerns us in our own lives in a personal way, we can know that right where we are, God is. And if it is a physical ailment, we can remember again that there is that perfect intelligence in every cell of our body, in every molecule, in every drop of blood, in every breath of air we breathe. Our organs are guided by this intelligence, and we align ourselves right now on behalf of our own well-being to express health and to express beauty and to be vibrant expressions of God's sweet love. So yes, there is a healing going on. And how blessed we are to know that there is information, that there are skilled surgeons, that there are brilliant people creating instruments for surgical procedures, so many things we rarely think of, that are supporting us and sustaining us and allowing us to be healed and whole in that physical way with the help of the physician. So I say thank you, God, for that. I say thank you, God, for healing our relationships, for showing us those tender places where we can open our heart a little bit more, where we can practice forgiveness and acceptance and still set healthy boundaries. And concerning our finances and that ways in which we are open to that experience of living a prosperous and healthy and well-funded life, I simply know that everything we need is already rushing into our lives, because there cannot be a problem that is too big for that idea of God, the divine influx of good into our lives. So I am standing in this place of deep, deep gratitude, knowing that in the mind of God, we are already experiencing that freedom, that wholeness, that beauty, that love. I say thank you, God. And I simply release this now and let it be. And together we say, and so it is.
Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun move in cannot find. Reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibition. I am unwritten, can't read my mind. I'm unrefined. I'm just beginning, the pen's in my hand, ending on prayer. Sorry, let the blank page before you. Open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you cannot find. Reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibitions, feel moving on your skin. No one else can feel it for you, only you can make it. No one else can speak the words on your lips. Drink yourself in words unspoken, may your life is on wide open. Today is where you could begin, the rest is still unwritten. Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you cannot find. Reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibition. Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you cannot find. Reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibition. Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you cannot find. Reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibition. Staring at the blank page before you, open up the dirty window, let the sun illuminate the words that you cannot find. Reaching for something in the distance, so close you can almost taste it. Release your inhibition. I am
Thank you, Point of Light. That was beautiful. Loved it. All right. So I just had to, when Reverend Cameron was bringing up that point about the mathematics and balancing their checkbook, well, I balance the checkbook at the church, and every so often it doesn't balance. And it was so funny because I'm like, it's so easy because I don't freak out because it is the principle of mathematics. So I'm like, Klein, just figure it out. And of course, I always figure it out, just so you know. So the checkbooks is balanced every month. So anyways, all right. So now is the time to celebrate our abundance, the abundance of the community, and the abundance of each one of our lives. So we're again to remind you that we're not passing an offering plate. We have a drop box in the back of the room and also in the bookstore area, so you can just drop off your tithe, your pledge there. So, but let's say our giving affirmation together now. I live in a consciousness of good. Divine love blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God, and so it is. You guys are up again?
Oh, yeah. They're gonna close us out.
We're closing this out. Yes. You can't get enough Point of Light.
There was a time in my life I thought I had to do it all for myself. I didn't know the grace of God was sufficient. Didn't know the love of God was at hand. I can say you are discouraged, struggling just to make it through another day. You've gotta let it go, gotta let it all go. This is what you've got to say. I release and I let go. I let the Spirit of my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith, I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. And I let go. Let the Spirit run my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith, I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God.
Thank you, Point of Light. That was awesome. That was so awesome. Thank you for being here today. So here's our closing affirmation. Repeat after me. I release and let go.
I release and let go.
I am free in the Spirit.
I am free in the Spirit.
Yes, I'm here for God.
Yes, I'm here for God.
Amen. And so it is. Thanks for being here. Remember, pray often, love much.